me turn my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. Man, crazy to think this is going to be the last Tuesday episode of the year of 2024. Wild to think we are at the end of another year. What a year. That's if somebody's like, can you describe 2024? I would literally just say, what a fucking year. Good, bad, and ugly. Just what a fucking year. I think in the world as a whole, in this country, in probably many of our personal lives, like, what the fuck was 2024? If I could speak on behalf of everybody, I feel like a lot of us are asking that question. But as I've been getting at, and as I've been reflecting personally on the podcast, these moments that challenge us, I think, also provide great opportunity and provide great insight and provide growth. And I think the way to really kind of squeeze the most out of these moments and really allow them to be something deeper than just a shitty day, a shitty month, a shitty year, is to slow down and reflect. And I think that's why I love, like, the end of the year does something to me, and I'm sure a lot of people as well. I feel incredibly nostalgic. I feel oftentimes incredibly grateful. And I think I feel hyper present. And I think that's what it does when you feel like you're approaching the end of something. You begin to take it all in just a bit more, and you begin, I think, to think about where it all started, right? And where you were at the top of the year. And, you know, for me, as I reflect and really try to squeeze out the lessons that I got from this year and what I'm trying to take with me into the new year, and you know, what the premise of today's show is going to be, as I was having that sort of conversation with myself and reflecting, you know, it is this idea of gratitude, which I hate that word to a degree, because I feel like it can also feel like somebody's gaslighting you. Just be a bit more grateful. You're not being grateful. You know, you're not having enough gratitude for all that you have in this life, in this world, right? You're very, you know, you're taking it for granted. And I hate to hear that. Probably internally because it makes me feel like a bad person. But it, for some reason, it also feels incredibly dismissive of all that you're going through. On the same hand, they're absolutely right. You know, like, I hate to say it, but they're absolutely right. Oftentimes, we're taking the present moment for granted, and we're hyper-focused on all that we don't have, rather than being appreciative for what we do have and seeing the beauty and the joy and the positive in our present moment, right? And again, to each their own, we're all going through different things, but there is something about that. There's a reason why the word gratitude keeps fucking coming around, and why there's gratitude journals and all these things, right? And I think also something that has been a prominent idea for me, even sort of operating in the background, is the idea of reconnection. And reconnection with myself and who I am and what I want and what I love. And it actually, what put that into like actual words for me, I've been reading this book called The Genius Zone, and they talk about this idea of recommitting, right? How many of us, we set a goal and like we're great at the beginning, and then we like have one slip up and we just end up in like this downward spiral going in the complete opposite direction of our goal. And then we end up beating the shit out of ourselves as a result. And the book talks about how the sort of slip up is normal and inevitable, and how everybody goes through that. Nobody is able to be perfect and do everything right every day all the time. But what sets apart those who achieve their goal is after that slip up, rather than going into a sort of extended downward spiral, they instead take that moment to recommit to the goal and get themselves back on track, right? They don't dwell on the fuck up. They don't dwell on the slip up. They say, okay, we're human. Now we're recommitted to the goal. And what gets you to the goal is not being perfect day in and day out. What gets you to the goal is a series of recommitments to the goal when you do inevitably slip up. And I found that to be comforting in many ways. And I found sort of peace in that for whatever reason. And I feel like it's something I'm taking with me into 2025. And I really sit here and in the present moment, life is good, right? Not perfect. So many things I want to do, to see, to experience, to achieve that I haven't yet, that I don't have a clear path towards just yet. But even with all that said, life is good. And life is this present moment right here. Life isn't the past. Life isn't the future. Life is right here, right now. And I don't know if I'm talking in circles here, but I guess one thing, all right, so I have a few quotes that I also put aside. And one of the quotes that kind of hit hard as I was like thinking about this topic and like how I wanted to frame it for the purpose of, you know, a podcast episode. One of the Stoics, Seneca, says, "Don't lose the day in expectation of the night, and the night in fear of the dawn." And I guess for me, why that hit me like a ton of bricks, because as I sort of set off onto this next chapter of my life, of my journey, of my career, of what I want, of chasing new goals, I recognize how much time I spent not living in the present moment and how much I took for granted as a result. And I kind of wanted to touch on that to a degree, and I guess what my frame of mind is going into 2025 and takeaways from the year, you know, all that I've sort of gone through and the ups and downs of it all. So today's really an episode of reflection, of a reminder to live in the present, and a recommitment to oneself. So with that in mind, let's get into our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente! Now, I mentioned this in the last episode where I was talking about like looking at these old photos in my phone from like, you know, years past or whatever, and recognizing that I was living out so much of what I dreamed of and that I was so close to all that I wanted, but in the moment couldn't see things that way. And it's only now in retrospect, older, more mature, sort of not having those things in my life on a regular basis anymore, those moments, being able to look at it and say, wow, man, like you were doing it. And I think this has been a crazy year of like, I don't want to say loss, but loss. I think it feels like so much was stripped away from me. And not to say that I'm in like, you know, I feel like I want to make sure I'm not exaggerating it to myself, right? Because then I miss the blessing that it is to still be able to do what I love on a daily basis, right? So it's not like I've had all that taken away from me, right? And it could be a lot worse, but I've basically had a more minimalist life this year. I've had a lot of things that I thought were going to happen fall through, a lot of walls hit, right? And basically really had to get comfortable with the idea of things not panning out as I had planned. And I reflect on this year, and it sounds cliche, but I have a level of gratitude because I feel like it made me hyper aware to the fact that none of this is to be taken for granted. And I feel like a bad person saying that because it's like, duh, right? There are so many people wishing and dreaming to get to do what I do, or any of us, right? If you are living a life where you have anything, there's somebody who's envious of it. You have a partner, a family, a home, a job. There's somebody who wishes they had that right now, right? And for me, as I like reflect back on that time period where all these things were happening, but I still felt like nothing was happening, dude, I took that for granted, man. Like in 2020, the beginning of it, and I mentioned this, I got to play in front of a sold-out crowd at my dream venue, right? The venue that I went to see my first like EDM act, like a DJ concert. And I remember saying to myself, one day I'm going to be on that stage. And I remember on Instagram, I would watch videos of DJs. Like there's one in particular that sticks in my mind. And this DJ, he had his cameraman was right behind him as he did his like intro and his entrance. And it was just huge. And I remember it gave me chills, and it's at that venue. And just be like, man, one day I'm going to step foot on that stage and get to play. And then I got that opportunity. And I was taking it for granted because I had a couple other big opportunities, right? And for me, it was like, it's cool, but I'm opening. I'm not headlining. They're not here to see me. I don't get to play exactly what I want to play. I have to kind of play to this bigger artist crowd, right? And be respectful of like the fact that I'm an opener, you know, and all those things. And all of that sort of cheapened the experience. And I did that to myself. And I also took it for granted, like, you know what, I'll be back here. So it's like, you know, let's just get through it type of thing. And I think in the moment I was happy, I was grateful, but I was still like thinking to myself, like, whatever, man. Like, I got to figure out what I'm doing with my life type of thing. And it's like, bro, you're thinking about everything except for the fact that you're living out one of your biggest goals. And how hard it is, how hard it was, how many years it took me to get to the point that I knew the right people to be considered to get on that stage. Took me so fucking long, so long into my career to get to that stage. And now in 2025, I could say this. I haven't announced it yet, but I'll say it here to the fam. January 10th, I get to go back onto that stage. And my reaction to it this time around was so different. Even right now, I feel it. Like the tears are watering. My eyes are watering up, and I feel the emotion behind it. I cried when I got the news that it was happening. When the email came in, I called my parents. Like that sort of deep gratitude and not taking it for granted this time around. It only came as a result of me going through the journey that I've gone through, of understanding how difficult it is to find success, how lucky I was to find consistent success. And even though I put in the hard work, that still doesn't guarantee the success. And I was fortunate that the opportunities kept presenting themselves, that I got in at a certain time. But as things got more difficult and it became harder and harder to continue to ascend to the next level, and having all these things sort of stripped away or not come to fruition makes me realize how lucky I am to have any sort of opportunity. And same situation in January. I'm opening, I'm not headlining, but and by the way, those intrusive thoughts still come up. I went from being super excited, just walking on cloud nine, and then a couple days later, I'm thinking like, all right, this is like a more difficult artist to open for. It's kind of like it's a different genre of like EDM, and like particularly opening a cold room, like when people are coming in and building up until the headliner comes on is difficult, especially in this genre. So then my imposter syndrome starts coming in of me not being able to do it, and then I just start telling myself or I start getting frustrated, like, oh, this isn't the right situation, this isn't the right a fun moment, this isn't gonna be the best thing, or it's not gonna be that fun. And I have to check myself and say, none of that matters. Right? This is so much bigger than that. This is a beautiful, amazing opportunity that you work so hard for. And not only that, but for me, sort of having a real conversation with myself about how much music means to me, and playing it and getting to perform it and all that comes along with it. And being so upset that I allowed myself to deviate from it for so long, and that I didn't appreciate it back then, and as a result I easily walked away from it. This moment is me sort of being able to pick up where I left off, which is like the ultimate gift. Right? Because the fear was like, man, did I fucking ruin and waste the moment that I had? But I think it's also proof where the things that are meant for you in this life will always find a way to come back to you. And as silly as it is with like DJing and music and stuff like that, on the surface as it sounds, like that's a spiritual thing for me. That's something I can't escape, this deep love for performing and playing music and creating it and doing all these things. And as much as I lie to myself and tell myself it's not what I want, it's not big enough for me, and all these different things, I keep getting drawn back to it. And to me, this was like God and the universe bringing me back to where I'm supposed to be. And the moment isn't lost on me. And I think we hear these sayings like you're presented with stuff when you're actually able to really receive them. And back then, I wasn't ready to receive those blessings because I always kept moving the goalpost to the next thing. And it's why I was a workaholic. It's why I didn't take care of myself physically, mentally. It's why I didn't have solid relationships. Because it was always on to the next thing. And I think you have to be hungry, you have to have desire, but you can't take for granted all that's happening in the present moment. And I took life for granted. And I think now this sort of reconnection as a result of things being taken away or minimized or stripped away, there's been a profound increase in my happiness, my ability to see and appreciate all that I have. I know we're striving for more, and that's beautiful, and I plan on doing gigantic things, but I'm not cheapening the present moment. And I think so many of us are living in a place where we just cheapen our current reality because we're fantasizing about being somewhere else. And I think it's why so many people are incredibly unhappy, because they've trained their mind to think happiness lies anywhere else except for the present moment. And again, it doesn't mean you can't be striving for other things and goal setting and whatever it might be, and you can continue to elevate your life and add to it. But even when you obtain those things, if you haven't trained your mind to find happiness in the present moment, it's a never-ending perpetual cycle of striving for the next thing. It's the idea of like imagining that happiness is right around the corner, rather than understanding happiness can be found right now in the present moment. And it's essential to find it in the present moment if you're ever going to enjoy the fruits of your labor, and you're ever going to enjoy this thing called life. And like I said, I've written down a couple quotes. And this one's from, Nat Han, and it stuck with me. The quote is, "Life can be found only in the present moment. The past is gone. The future is not here yet. And if we do not go back to ourselves in the present moment, we cannot be in touch with life." I'm sorry, it's Thich Nhat Hanh said that. If we do not go back to ourselves in the present moment, we cannot be in touch with life. You're not living unless you are able to just be. That sounds so fucking cliche and like, ugh. I'm trying to work just be into the, but really that's the whole concept of fucking just be, right? When I did that whole retreat and that stuck with me, it's like, this is life. What's happening right now is life. All of its beauty is happening right now. It's not in some far off land or some fucking goal that you check off the box and all of a sudden life becomes beautiful. You have to find beauty in life right now. And again, it's because of the way our mind works. What you do and how you react and how you process things, it trains your mind for how you're going to process everything moving forward. So if you are unable to find happiness in the present moment, if you're constantly cheapening the present moment, dude, you're going to keep doing that even when you have $1 million in the bank. Even when you are living out your dream job in your dream city, living in your dream house. Your mind is trained to find a reason to take you out of the present moment and tell you you need something else, because you've done that. Because you keep escaping the present moment. You keep not appreciating the present moment. That training, that groove in your brain will continue on regardless of what you have in the physical, regardless of what you've been able to manifest. And that's why I think so many wealthy, so many successful people are unhappy, because their mind is trained to look for what they don't have. And that's the sickening thing about being a human being. You could have so fucking much and still trick yourself into thinking you need more, or it's not enough, or whatever it might be. The grass is always greener on the other side, right? That cliche saying. It's for a reason. So that's like when you hear people talk about, if you can't be happy now, you're not going to be happy when you get what you want. Yeah, because you have to develop the mindset of looking for the good in the present moment, of being able to enjoy and appreciate the present moment. Because without that mindset, without the development of that mindset, you're never going to find the happiness that you're searching for. It's always going to seem like it's right around the corner. Even if you're fucking, driving your dream car, it seems like, oh, but the real dream car is right around the corner type of thing, right? Everything. And literally, it's only in reflection that you realize, man, I had it so fucking good. Wasn't perfect, but fuck, there was so much to be grateful for, right? That's what I felt looking at those old pictures. Yes, it wasn't perfect. Yes, there were struggles. But fuck, was I doing cool things that I enjoyed, that I loved doing, things that I talked about and dreamed about fucking doing. And it's only now that I wasn't doing them and don't have them in my life that I reflect back and realize how special that moment was, that time period. Right? It's just like as you get older and you realize, I don't want to say your best years are behind you, but I wouldn't want to relive my 20s, to be quite fair. But I think about my 20s, and I think about how that mindset was that this is basically going to last forever. This carefree, nothing really matters moment was going to kind of last. I didn't think past it. And you recognize, as much as I maybe don't want to live that on a day-to-day basis anymore, that was a special moment in time of exploration and finding myself. Those moments had value. But because I was always thinking of the next thing, I didn't stop to think about and appreciate the value. And I want to touch on a couple of things. So we'll pause here. We'll take a quick break, and then a couple more things I want to touch on. All right, we are back, and one of the things I want to touch on, like a moment I had this past weekend or Friday, the radio station I work for in New York City, Z100, has like an annual concert called Jingle Ball, and if you grew up in the New York City area, it's a big deal. It's like the biggest concert, and it's at Madison Square Garden. A bunch of giant artists, and it's like one of those things that like everybody who grew up in this area would always try to get tickets because it sells out in like 3 seconds. And I've been fortunate enough to be a part of it for years now. At this point, they do a pre-show at Hammerstein Ballroom, which is another big venue here in New York, and I've been fortunate enough to DJ it for years at this point, right? And I always would look at what I didn't have, right? Because I was like, all right, I'm the DJ, but all of the jocks, like the people who are radio personalities on air, they get to do cooler stuff. They're doing interviews, right? They're on stage at Madison Square Garden introducing artists, and like they're treated as like the stars for the day, And as a DJ, I'm not getting the same treatment. It's kind of like, all right, well, it's I'm not like in my mind, I'm just like a forgotten element or whatever, right? In my mind, I go up there, play some music, and then it's done, and I have to watch, and I watch everybody else sort of like living out these big moments, right? And in the past, I would always be like, man, wait till I get to, my goal was to be on air. Wait till I get to be the one introducing on stage. That would be the moment. Wait till I'm doing interviews. That'll be the moment. It's like, okay, you guys are shitting on me now. Wait till I'm that person. And these are like radio shows, so it's like a mixed crowd of like ages. So I'm not like playing these like sets that I'm like would record and be proud to share to the world. Like I'm just trying to get people to sing along and have fun, and like, some corny pop songs to a degree, or stuff to dance to. And I would always like devalue it as like, oh, this is like, cheap DJing type of thing. And this was the first year I can honestly say that I was on stage And, there's however many thousand people there, whatever. And I genuinely was just like, I'm enjoying myself. Like I was able to stop in the moment while on stage and remind myself, take this in. This is special. And I felt so grateful and happy in that moment. And this was the first time, and not to say a couple times I had a couple of flare-ups of like envy, but this was the first time for the most part that I was just like, you know what? This is great. I'm so happy and lucky to be here. And I'm just going to go with the flow and enjoy myself and do my part, and that's it. And what's actually fucking crazy is, so what oftentimes will happen is after I'm done DJing, the concert then is at Madison Square Garden. And again, I'm not, I have nothing to do at that point. I'm just hanging out because I've already done my gig. So like you're at Madison Square Garden, you're backstage, like again, ridiculous fucking honor. That's where the New York Knicks and the Rangers play, and like, every gigantic artist in the world dreams of coming to play, and you're walking around backstage and like bumping into people. And like this person's walking by you and that person. I'm not going to name drop because that's tacky, but Robert De Niro was there. I will say that. Anyway, but normally most of the time they would give me a pass. I would walk in, I'd be like, fuck this, and just walk out. Like, think about that. You have people calling left and right to buy tickets, or people like upset they couldn't buy tickets, and then they're begging to get tickets, at the giveaways and things like that. Here I am with the fucking all access pass, and I'm like, fuck this sucks, like that tells you everything you need to know, right? Of not living in the present moment. And again, this was the year where I was like, hey, I'm just gonna go, I'm gonna have fun. I don't really care, like because they have like also with these passes, there's like you have all access, but there's like extra badges to get into extra restricted areas, like where like the free booze and food are. And like I've always been of the type where I'm like, I'm not gonna ask somebody for that, like they should just give it to me. So whatever, if I don't get it, fuck them. So but this year I was like, dude, if I have to go buy a hot dog and a beer by myself on like the mezzanine of Madison Square Garden, I'm gonna enjoy myself. This is what I'm gonna do. But life rewards good energy of you just being like in a great, happy place, right? Because I walked in there just happy as could be to fucking hang out. What happens as I'm walking in, I run into another person I work with at iHeart, and he's got the juice. He's got the connects. And he's like, oh, I'll see you at that lounge. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't have a passport, but it's cool, man. I'll be around just hanging out. And he's like, nah, no way. And he walks me through, gets me a pass for like the VIP of VIP lounges. And I end up just boozing it up and eating amazing food the entire night. And just literally, even though I'm not the one on stage like I had dreamed about at Madison Square Garden, I'm having the time of my life, and I'm bullshitting with coworkers. I'm just like, eating quesadillas and drinking free beer and just enjoying the moment for the first time. This is literally, I've done this, I think, maybe 5 years. I've done 5 years of this. This is the first time I could honestly say I'm like, from start to finish, I had such a fucking great time. Like, just appreciated it and loved the moment and had a blast, man. Just had such a good fucking time. And that is all the result of, like, having a perspective shift because life kicked you in the fucking face and made you recognize, stop taking this shit for granted. Stop taking the moment for granted just because it doesn't look exactly how you would hope. Or you did hope, or you hoped it would. There you go. English. And I think that's so much of like of what it is. We often have this expectation as to what life is supposed to look like. And when it doesn't look exactly how it's supposed to look like, we then are like, oh, well, it sucks because it doesn't look like what it's supposed to look like. And it's like, dude, no. it's not going to always look like what it does in your mind. In fact, most of the time, it never looks like that. Doesn't mean it's fucking bad. Different doesn't mean bad. Or just because you're not exactly there yet, but you're experiencing a slice of what you want, enjoy that fucking slice. Right? That's like how little kids, when they have to like share something, right? They'll like have a temper tantrum, right? If there's like one donut and you're like, hey, you got to share it with your brother. And then they flip the fuck out and they're like, no, I don't even want it then. And in your mind as an adult, you're like, you know how fucking crazy that sounds? That you're willing to not have this, at least half of this delicious donut because you're not getting the entire thing? That's what we do as adults each and every day by not appreciating the present moment. We sacrifice the joy that we could find just because it's not as much joy as we think we're supposed to be getting. It's wild. It's silly. It's childish. But we do it every day. And I think I use that word reconnecting. Or I guess if I could say what was the theme of this year, it was reconnection. Reconnection with myself. Reconnection with the kid who was striving for something, right? The kid who, when he first got into radio, was so fucking grateful and appreciative that he got to open for free at a random radio station event for one of their DJs. Like, I was on fucking cloud nine. I felt like I made it. And then I lost that little by little because I wanted more. And when it wasn't more, I then sucked all the fucking joy that I should have felt out of that moment because it wasn't what I wanted it to be. It wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. And I think a lot of us have to take time to sort of reconnect and realize how far we've come, appreciate how far we've come, appreciate that while we may not be where we want to be, appreciate where we are. Wherever it is, there's something to be found to appreciate. And I think you have to stop and find yourself, at times. You have to re-find yourself. I think life is so fucking crazy and oftentimes so fucking stressful that it's easy to just get lost in it all, and you're just doing what you got to do to fucking survive. And in doing that, you become like this fucking zombie who is just a shell of the person they used to be. And that's what leads us down this sort of spiral of unhappiness and sadness and depression and all that comes along with it. Because we've gotten so far away from who we are and what makes us happy because we've just been fucking surviving and looking forward to the next thing, right? Like, I think of an analogy, like when I was a kid, I was a senior in high school, and in the suburbs, everybody had a car. I was the only one that didn't have a car. I was younger, so I got my license later than everybody else. On top of that, I didn't get my first car until I was starting college the following year. So I had to borrow my parents' car. So my mom carpooled, so every other day I would have her car. But on those days I didn't have her car, I had to walk home. And as a 17-year-old senior in high school, it's embarrassing to fucking walk home when everybody else is in friends' cars or driving their own car. As stupid as it sounds now, it mattered at that time. And I would be so fucking ashamed and embarrassed. And I would go somewhere else mentally to get me through that. And it's not going to have a far walk, which is silly now that I think about it. But I would go somewhere else mentally. I would be in my dream car, which at the time was a Chevy Trailblazer. And I was driving home from school in that car, or driving around living my best life. And I would be customizing the car in my head and you know, picking out the songs I'd be listening to. And that got me through like blocking out watching who was driving by me in embarrassment. And I think so many of us, myself included, we go through life every day doing a version of that, living somewhere else in our head other than the present moment just to get through it. And that is seeing only being, you know, only focusing on the negative, right? You're only focusing on the fact that moment sucks, and like you're just focusing on every aspect about it that sucks, and every car that drives by, you know, and what they must be thinking about you and all those things. You're not looking for any positive, and as a result, you end up becoming just like this zombie to survive, like I said. And I think you do that enough, you end up losing yourself. You end up getting further and further away from who you are and who you want to be. And that's, again, why I love this end of the year, because as you reflect and you sort of inevitably, you can't help but just think about the year and think about the next one. It gives you a moment to sort of analyze where you are and where you want to be and all that's happened, and to just stop and reflect for a second. And with that, I think reconnection can come if you make it a priority. And I think that's sort of what I've done and tried to do. And I think what has sort of given me this optimism going into the new year. And I had optimism going into this year, going into 2024, but it's a different optimism. It's not one of waiting for the next explosive opportunity. It's optimism of being grateful and happy with what I'm currently doing and just looking forward to more of that. And I think that is the shift that I needed to make, and maybe that's why some of the challenges I faced this year needed to happen so that I could sort of tweak that a little bit. And I'll end on that idea of recommitting, right? That book I mentioned, The Genius Zone, the idea they talk about recommitting. Because I think what often happens as we go on these journeys, and I think what hardens us and makes us frustrated and upset, is not only the disappointments of life from external circumstances, but I think the moments where we fall short of what we know we're capable of. It's like you're on a diet, you're doing really fucking well, and then like you have that one cheat meal that goes way too far, and it just opens up Pandora's box of like, well, fuck it. I already ate shitty on Wednesday. I might as well ride this thing out until next week. And then next week comes along and you're so far off track at that point because you've just been fucking breaking your diet. Like I had, like a no carbs diet, and you had like one dinner bun, you went out to eat and you like, well, fuck, I don't have one dinner bun. Next thing you know, you're just fucking carbing it up for the and you're like, you know what, I'll restart this no carb thing next week. And oftentimes we've gone too far off the edge here where we're just fucking dinner bun with every meal at that point, right? And that is why we fail, or why we deviate, or why like we fall off track and go so far in the wrong direction until we like it gets so bad that we're like, fuck, man, I'm so far off from my goal and what I wanted. And then you're mad at yourself and you're beating yourself up, right? Or maybe you like had a savings goal and you got tempted and you bought something on eBay. Hypothetical, of course. I'm not talking about myself or anything. And at that point, you're like, fuck it. I might as well, I could do a couple more things. And then all of a sudden you're like, dude, I can't believe the money I had set aside for this, I just blew it on some random shit. And then it's like, fuck, now I have to start all over again. And you're mad at yourself. And you're beating yourself up and you're angry. And in this book, they talk about the idea of like, when you slide, you first of all can't beat yourself up over it, because oftentimes it makes you backslide even further. Understand that that is human. You're going to inevitably, at some point, unfortunately, deviate from the path at hand. But the ability to achieve that goal and to not downward spiral is to accept the fact that you slipped up, but then recommit to your intended goal in that moment. Right? So I've had this goal. I'm trying not to eat out as much, like Uber Eats. I'm like, when I think about how much money I spend on one meal unnecessarily because of fees and everything, I'm like, I'm paying, you end up paying fucking $20 for a Chipotle burrito that costs, what, $10 or something like that. And it's like, dude, I'm paying double the money because I'm, A, being too lazy to leave my house, and B, I'm not cooking the food that's been sitting in my fridge and freezer. So my goal is like, all right, chill out with that. And there have been times where it's like, oh, especially like this last week, time got away from me, and I was like, I don't have time to cook. I've got to get it out of the house. Like, if I spend a half an hour cooking a meal, then I'm not going to have time to like prep for my DJ gig. So I end up like, fuck it, I'm going to Uber eat something because I have to eat, whatever. But I realign with the goal in mind. The next day, I end up like, all right, fuck it. Yesterday I broke my rule. I'm planning a further ahead today where I'm going to now in the morning create a bit more structure so that I do have time to cook a meal before I have to leave the house. Right? That's me recommitting to that goal. I'm not beating the shit out of myself. I'm not making myself feel bad. I'm also not going on a downward spiral where I just say, fuck it, we're going to make it rain on Uber Eats. I was saying, okay, I fell short a little bit here, but that's where it ends. I'm recommitting to what I want. And I think that is a beautiful, takeaway that I had that I'm going to carry into 2025. That life isn't about being perfect at your intended goal. It's about taking note in the moments that you slip up and recommitting to that goal. Like, achieving a goal isn't about being perfect. It's a series of recommitments of the it's like driving a car. I think in the book they use this example. You're driving a car. It's not just like 10 and 2, arms straight the entire time. You're like adjusting the wheel to stay on the road, right? The road curves. You inevitably, move your hand a little bit and the car shifts and you have to readjust. If you didn't do that, you'd probably drive yourself off a fucking cliff and never get to your intended target, right? So that's what it is to achieve a goal. It's just a series of recommitments, of readjustments along the path. And just like you don't beat the shit out of yourself every time you have to, steer the car in a particular direction to stay on the road, you accept that that's a normal part of driving every day. You have to accept that on your goal, your path towards your goal, it's going to be the same thing, a series of little readjustments and recommitments. And eventually, you get to where you want to be. Last thing before I get out of here, too, I want to say as like a takeaway of 2025. Stop chasing the explosive wins. And I say this to myself. Every day is not going to provide the email you've been waiting for, the opportunity you've been waiting for. And that doesn't mean that today is any less relevant or important. More often than not, life is about the grunt work that you do each and every day. The little fucking things that don't seem like they're moving the needle very far, but you show up and do them anyway. That is 99% of the game. Those little things you do, those lead to those big explosive wins. But it's the showing up when you don't feel like it. It's the moments that you feel like you're fucking, you're like treading through mud and you're just barely getting across the finish line. Like yesterday I had one of those days where it was like, I'm like literally, face palming and like forcing myself. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I don't feel like sitting in front of this computer doing anything. But I push past, do what I have to get done, and go the fuck to bed. Right? But that is a day that needs to happen. The little grunt work. And eventually, one of those emails that I sent out doing the grunt work, one of the little things that I did, that I did yesterday, will lead to that big explosive win. But again, it's the result of doing the work even on the days I don't feel like it, and being okay with doing the dirty work that has zero fucking gratification, immediate gratification in it. That's why NBA players who are the greatest in the world still have practice, right? It's why Kobe Bryant was in the gym at 4 a.m. shooting free throws, even though he was the best player in the world. It's that little grunt work that then leads to championships, that leads to the wins in the game, that lead to the big moments that get replayed on fucking SportsCenter and ESPN. And I think that's what you got to remind yourself of, is like, stop chasing the big moments, stop prioritizing the big moments, stop thinking that you are not on the right path just because you're not having a big explosive win. Every day that you can do the little grunt work, that's a fucking win. I've been reflecting as I brush my teeth, as I walk into my bedroom. I'm like, what did we do well today? I'm like, oh, we got all these little things. These emails were sent out. That's why I have my to-do list. And like at the beginning of the day, it starts in like red. And as I cross off things, I highlight them in green. And when I look at that to-do list and I see a whole bunch of green, I'm like, you fucking killed it today, right? Even if it was little things, send an email to this person, schedule this, right? Book this hotel for your friend's wedding. Highlight that shit in green. That's a win, right? And then I'm like, all right, well, what could I have done better? You know what? I didn't wake up with my first alarm like I hoped. I was feeling a little sluggish this morning. I'd like to be able to give myself that extra, 30 minutes of time to work on something early in the morning while it's still quiet. I'm not beating myself up. I'm just making a note of it, right? And that's what we have to do, is like those little wins, those little those moments that feel non-essential, that feel silly, that feel like there's not much going on. That's what we have to recognize. Like all of that adds up to the big moments. I hope that made sense. But yeah, that's my reflections for 2024 going into 2025. With that said, let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
So I'm not going to do like a summer. I feel like I dove into everything pretty heavily, and quite frankly, or quite honestly, a lot of it was like train of thought, so I don't even know what the fuck I just talked about. But what I will say is this. Take some time to reflect as this year ends, and try and reconnect, see where you may have lost yourself along the way, whether it's this year, whether it's years of doing so. I think just clarity is the greatest gift you can give yourself. Really refining who you are, what it is that you want, what have you been doing that you think is no longer you or not serving you anymore. I think reconnecting with yourself, right? I guess that's the one of the words, the key words of today's episode. And also recommitting to your goals, right? And doing so, not beating the shit out of yourself if you've deviated from the path, but understanding this is all part of the process. Recommitment is part of the process. Even if you fell off a day ago, a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, you can reconnect now. You can recommit now and get back on track towards your goal and living life as you should. Again, recommitting. And I guess that's the biggest thing. And it's just like this present moment. I think it's understanding, man, like all the success in the world means nothing if you never learned how to appreciate the present moment, what you have. You could always chase and want more. Look at these billionaires who for no reason are being greedy as fuck because they live in this mindset of thinking they need more. They've never adjusted to just being happy. To them, it's never enough, right? They get a yacht, some other guy gets a bigger yacht, and then that's the next fucking thing. And it turns them into these maniacs who aren't happy with their present life. And that's not something to strive for. I think we all want to be better than that. So, yeah, I think just use this energy of reflection, of anticipation for the next year and all these things, like as a means to reconnect with yourself and just get back to living. One more quote that I found that I really liked was from Anonymous. It says, if you have one eye on yesterday and one eye on tomorrow, you're going to be cockeyed today. That's a silly quote, but I appreciate it. Nobody wants to be walking around cockeyed if they could help it. Nothing wrong if you are, but, I don't think anybody's striving to do that. So, present moment, man. I think that's the key. You can be motivated for the future while still understanding there's joy and happiness to be found in the present moment as well. With that said, I'll catch you on Thursday for our Thursday Trends episode, our last one of 2024, which is wild to even say. Until then, stay safe and we shall talk soon. Peace.